Okay, sorry about the technical difficulties there. Hello, everybody. Hi,
Hello.
Andy.
How's it?
We're doing good. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good. Absolutely. It's a beautiful day out today.
It is. Okay. Again, sorry about the technical difficulties there. I'm just going to introduce myself real quick. I'm Kat Kearney. I am an AmeriCorps member with Conservation Nebraska. This is what happens to our stormwater with Andy Szatko. Andy has worked with the city oh, wow, you joined the city in 2011, right? So you've been with the city for nearly 15, almost 15 years now.
Getting pretty
And
close.
yeah, Andy has been instrumental in managing green infrastructure maintenance and overseeing the city's municipal separate storm sewer system. And today he's going to be talking a little bit about what happens to our stormwater in Omaha, which is a great topic, especially with the storms recently. Just going to let everybody know that this meeting is being recorded, so it will be up on our YouTube channel within about 2 weeks. All participants' cameras and microphones are off. If you have a question, please put it in the Q&A or in the chat, and we will get to you either during the presentation if there's a stopping point where it seems like there's a good point to ask questions, or we'll wait until the end to go ahead and do all of that. Okay, do you have permission to share your screen, Andy?
All right. And then we'll wait for that ability. It says it's been disabled.
Oh,
I think I just enabled it, so let me know if it updated on your end.
thank you,
There
Kate.
we go. We got it. And we'll do that one. All right. Well, thank you, Kat, for the introduction. Thank you for everyone for being here. My name is, again, Andy Szatko. I'm going to try and look at you, but I have multiple screens. So one of the fun things about Zoom is trying to be interactive with everybody virtually. And so to kick it off, we kind of start setting the stage here. And by all means, please put questions in the chat as we go along. I do enjoy the interactiveness of presenting and talking about what people have questions on, especially when we're talking about it during the course of the presentation. So definitely let me know if you got questions that come up. And so talking with Kat and what to talk about today is about where does our stormwater go, what happens to it, and kind of the storms of spring has really brought this to kind of the forefront to learn about what happens in Omaha with stormwater, what happens in different parts of the city too, because as we'll learn, the part of town that you're in has an impact on where it goes, how it gets managed. So this picture here is of about 180th and Q Street. You got Millard West there on the right, you got Hy-Vee on the left, and then up in the background, you can see Lake Zorinsky over there. And it's a nice picture to be able to show because kind of shows how when we develop a city, how much impervious cover there is. It's, we got houses all around behind Hy-Vee. You got Hy-Vee in the big parking lot. We got athletic fields for the school. We got the strip malls right down here in the foreground. Ultimately, all this is rushing off over into our Papio Creek system and over into the lakes like Lake Zorinsky there. And so when you get high up above, you can kind of appreciate that while our one house may not be adding a whole lot of runoff together, we have significantly changed the land in the communities in which we live in. So there's a lot of runoff to manage. And one of the things we're going to do first off is just kind of getting a basic understanding of stormwater in Omaha. So if you've listened to one of my presentations before, you'll hear some similar stuff as before, but I want to introduce it in a little bit of a different way this time. We're going to talk about the two different main types of the sewer systems in Omaha quickly, give you some context so you better understand when you hear certain things about runoff and how it pertains to different parts of town. be a little bit more knowledgeable in that area. We'll dive into green infrastructure. That's kind of where I like to hang out and work and learn more and share information about green infrastructure. We'll learn a lot about coming up here in a little bit, but definitely all sorts of scales of green infrastructure exist out there. And so hopefully I'll be able to share information and get you going on doing some of your own at your home, or if you have a business, at your business as well. And then we'll open up for Q&A at the very end. So what is stormwater? Simply put, it's precipitation that runs off the surface. So here we got a picture of downtown Omaha. Here in the foreground is Spring Lake Golf Course, and kind of illustrates how isolated storms can be, how rain can be over downtown, which is a pretty impervious area, versus the golf courses and residential areas that have lots of green space, trees, and grass. So why do we manage stormwater? You know, it's just water, right? It's got to go somewhere. You know, as long as my house doesn't flood, not a big deal. Flooding of your house is definitely a reason to manage stormwater, but the previous picture is looking out to downtown Omaha. This one's looking down at Spring Lake Park, where there was significant sewer separation that took place in that neighborhood. And the neighborhood and the city came together to create an amenity there, which is Spring Lake Park. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. And what you see right there is the lake in Spring Lake Park that gives it its name. So for this graphic I've maintained for a number of years now, it goes back to 2006, but it shows the annual rainfall in our area taken from Epley Airfield. And so far this year, it feels like we've had a lot. We also just went through a dry stretch as well, but we're about where we were last year. And last year was a pretty dry year. Last 2 years have been dry. But you can see how it's kind of feast or famine. You know, our average annual rainfall is 30 inches. The last 4 of the 5 have been below average. But if you go back to 2015, it was a really wet year, and we had a record rainfall that year of 44.5 inches. Our record driest month was in 2020, 17.65. The spread between those two rain events is almost 27 inches, which is almost our average annual rainfall. So it really is true when we say it can be feast or famine around here. And we never want to take anything for granted. So when we talk about managing stormwater, we got to realize we're not always going to have a lot of it some years, and we're also it's not going to always be dry. So we got to think and plan accordingly when it comes to that. This graphic in the lower right corner is from 2020, that dry year, and it kind of shows the distribution of rain events. And this generally follows track for each year in terms of the size of storm that happens. Out of the total of 97 rain events that happened in 2020, there were 7 that were over a half an inch. There was 2 over an inch. There was 36 over between a tenth of an inch and a half an inch. There was 52 of those 97 were less than a hundredth of an inch, or trace amounts. So when we talk about managing stormwater, a lot of our stormwater, a lot of our rain comes to us in small storm events, smaller rain events. But we often have to deal with these very intense events that happen. And so it becomes a challenge at times for what do you design to? As we go through this presentation, learn a little bit more about how to manage stormwater, where does it go? It's, well, how do you know what size to build something to manage the really big storms, but also be efficient at those smaller storms? So 2024 has been a significant, has had a number of significant rain events, storm events so far this year. The picture on the lower left corner, it's hopefully it's streaming well for you, is a time lapse of a storm from June 3rd. love to be a weather geek myself, so you can see how exciting storms can be when you're far away. But the top right is the May 21st storm, and it kind of shows the red areas as being heavy rain. And if you look over here, it's about a 5 to 6 inch rain event in these areas with those pink areas. But the volume was a lot, but the intensity was a lot as well. And so initial results had it somewhere around that 100-year event that you hear folks talk about. That's 100-year in the sense of how fast it came, not necessarily the size of the storm. And so we've had a couple more of these throughout the year, including June 3rd. We've had more storms at the early part of July as well. So all this, we break it down. That's great. Stats, good information, good data. I like to show these stats, or these pictures, I should say, from 2008, early in my stormwater landscaping career. I had a gentleman who was referred to me. He says, "Oh, call Andy. He can help you figure out how to deal with some water in your yard." And he lives in a typical West Omaha neighborhood, walkout, or some have walkout basements, some have patios, but all of the neighborhood's designed to drain through the backyards. And this is about at the top third of the neighborhood. And so I get there, take a look around. I'm like, okay, this is great. And he proceeds to show me the pictures from a storm event in June, where he has about a 10-foot wide river coming through his yard, gets within about 3 feet of his house as it continues on down the way. Challenges in a residential setting with stormwater is sometimes each builder does their own thing and starts to push and pull water in different places. Blissfully ignorant of what it means to be able to put in, looking right up here, this patio was put in, and then the soil was kind of used to grade out and around from it. So it really pushes the water out into the yard, and it makes a hard turn coming back in. Is it supposed to do that? Does it work? It obviously does. It does flow down. Unfortunately, it kind of squeezes that water down around this patio. It kind of speeds up, and it gets really kind of close as it expands back out next to his house. In between the homes, it's only about 10 to 12 feet in here. And so water is coming in between your homes. So if you're building a new home, if you're maintaining your existing home, always think about water coming into, through, and out of your property. So green infrastructure, a trench drain that somebody did attempt to put here, right here at the fence, are too small and not going to do much when we're talking about this amount of water. The scale of stormwater really starts to accumulate quickly once we start getting into those heavier rains in a neighborhood here that when the houses were built, the soils were compacted. So we have some challenges to overcome there. Now, in a more commercial setting, this is the same storm from 2008, but when I was a landscape contractor, this is the old skate lane on 84th and F Street. And there was straight line winds during that storm as well. We had about 2 inches of rain per hour was the rate. So there was over an inch of rain in a half an hour. Winds were coming in, and this was the day of my daughter's birth. So finally remember this storm. And you see coming in, and what ends up happening is this whole parking lot and then the Wendy's and another area drain onto this parking lot. And there's just this one inlet in the parking lot for all that water to fit into. Think of it as a bathtub. Bathtub has a drain in the bottom of it. And when you pull the plug, all that water that's in your bathtub, it takes time for it to go out through that hole because it can only let so much water through. The same thing here, we have a bathtub with the drain in the bottom of it. When it rains really heavy, the inflow, all the water flowing to it, exceeds how fast it can get out. So the parking lot floods and creates issues for people that might be in the parking lot. Working with an engineer, a designer, when you do a commercial building, you always want to think about how is water going to drain from our property? Is it going to leave our property safely so it doesn't impact our neighbors? Lots of different things. But these are reasons in these kind of two different scenarios why we manage stormwater, why it's important. So water, when we talk about it, gets dirty when it flows over our neighborhoods, our community, our city. And so this was a picture of a paint can at a construction site that didn't fall into the trash can and end up kind of spilling out. And then when it was raining, that paint washed out onto the street. This is a construction site that had a intense storm. Some of their controls that were in place didn't hold up very well. And so a lot of sediment laden water started to flow and run onto adjacent roads because that's where, the water went to, and caused a lot of issues, as you can see here, with cars driving through it. So we have a quality issue, and we also have a quantity issue. A lot of people talk about flood control. I don't like the word control. It implies that we can literally control everything, but Mother Nature will always one-up us. And so I like to think of it as flood management, or just the amount of stormwater, trying to figure out how to safely manage it as best as we can. This is the Missouri River Water Resource Recovery Facility, just south of the South Omaha Bridge. And what you can see here is earlier in July, the Missouri River flooded. Odds are you probably heard a little bit about it on the news. And this road is in kind of the lower left corner of the screen. That's the levee that runs up north to downtown past the airport. It comes down here and then runs in between these buildings and kind of ties into the bluff that's over here. Part of the plant itself is not protected, and so you see these, it's kind of hard to see on this picture, but there's a line of these really big sandbags that go around to help keep the water from impacting the facility. And so there's a lot that goes into making sure we protect properties near the river. Fortunately, this flood event didn't last as long as the one in 2011, but it reached a higher height than the one in 2019. So we've had 3 major floods in the Missouri River since 2011. So it's becoming, and I hope it doesn't, fairly routine, it seems like. And that's something to take into account as we think and manage stormwater in our community. Forgot to mention or show the green line from up north of Epley Airfield. There's a line that helps protect the city when the flooding happens along the Missouri River. And that flood in July, the main reason that it came about was a lot of record rain events in South Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, below the dams that are on from about in the southeast corner of South Dakota up the Missouri River. There's a series of dams up there, but a lot of this rain happened just below those dams and rushed all to the Missouri River, which caused the flooding that we saw. It was the 5th highest historical flood of all time, and you can kind of see we reached almost 33 feet, and minor flood stage starts at 27 feet. So quantity issue, quality issues, and when we start managing stormwater, if we can protect our property, that water still has to go somewhere. And so for any city in America, or anywhere for that matter, that water goes somewhere. If we use storm sewers to move that water, it has to go into streams or drainage ways. And so this is a picture that shows the streets up here in the neighborhood have storm sewers. And the storm sewer comes down, and right where you see these kind of gray baskets of rocks, back in there is where the storm sewer lets all the water out. Unfortunately, you can think of it as a fire hose. And if you shoot, even with your garden hose, at bare dirt in your yard, what happens? the soil starts to break up and you get a hole that forms. Our streams and creeks are naturally able to hold up to the fire hose that's shooting at the creek. And so you get this erosion that starts to happen, and it can impact properties adjacent to it. Safety is a concern as well. When we have ditches and sidewalks at parks intersecting, and water will find the path of least resistance. And in this case, it found one outside of the culvert underneath the sidewalk and is washing it out there. And it's also just good to be a good neighbor. Okay, why do we manage stormwater? Because if this is my house that I'm building, I want to be friends with my neighbor, and so I'm going to do everything I can to manage, in this case, runoff from a construction site. That's where this black silt fence comes into play. You know, the silt fence could come up the street a little bit, you know, so it doesn't get into the street. The silt fence is not a magic bullet, however. You know, you might see these tubes of straw that are used in place of silt fence. You know, they're not silver bullets, and they can't hold up to some of the really intense storms. In that case, we work with folks to respond well, to come out into the street, to clean the street up in a timely fashion, to work with their neighbor on cleaning those up. So we all want to be good neighbors, good stewards of our community. So the old mindset of stormwater management has been to move it away as fast as we can, right? But that's, we want to get it away from our house. And this is a residential property where a lot of water is draining right to their backyard, and they're at the bottom of a drainage area. And they put their pool in, and what they found out shortly thereafter was during big storm events, water would come down where this rock is at and then go straight into their pool. So they actually did their own storm sewer system. And in this case, this scenario, still wasn't enough to handle all storm events, and they would continue to have impacts to their pool. And so the thought there was, you know, people will come in, try to control it as much as they can. Unfortunately, it just didn't quite hit the mark. So when we talk about stormwater management, we can definitely do better. We don't have to pipe everything. We don't have to rock everything or pave everything. There's lots of good solutions out there. So when we talk about stormwater management, we're talking about implementing a plan to manage stormwater as it goes into, through, and out of a given area, watershed, property, might be your own property, with green and gray infrastructure. It's not an either or. A lot of things I'm going to talk about is green infrastructure. This is Central High School. I'm in downtown Omaha, and when they put on a new addition to the school a few years ago, they put a green roof on it. And his green roof does a great job of slowing the water down before it leaves the site. Well, it's got all sorts of other benefits with it in terms of pollinator habitat, having cooler ambient temperatures up there, having a place for students to go and hang out. Lots of different benefits come with this than something that might be an underground tank that holds water and then slowly releases it. In that tank scenario, I would describe it as a one-trick pony, right? It's just slowing water down. You don't get all the extra benefits that come with it. But sometimes you have to go a tank route, potentially, because you just don't have the ability to do something like this. There's lots of tools in the toolbox. So there's a variety of situations and issues to take into account at your home, at your business, or if you want to come work for the city, how to think about approaching these solutions. We need to make sure we use all the tools in the toolbox. So when we talk about green infrastructure tools, we're talking about natural elements, natural things, soil, plants, and topography of the land to preserve, connect, and mimic natural processes to manage that water where it lands. This is Creighton Prep High School up here in the background, and their main parking lot drains into this large bioretention garden, or you can just think of it as a rain garden as well. But we have lots of different sedges in the bottom. We have some native grasses around the side. These purple flowers are asters that are blooming. And there's a number of other plants that are in there. And so when water comes in here on the west end, it's really got to work hard to make its way into the garden. And then the whole thing has to fill up. If there's so much rain it fills up all the way, it'll spill out over here to an inlet, a storm sewer inlet, and it'll make its way down to Coal Creek. So this is an example of green infrastructure. Some other types of green infrastructure, you've got rain gardens, bioswale. You can think of it as just a vegetated ditch, right? It's something that moves water, that has plants on it, versus what we just saw. A rain garden holds water in place. Rain barrels collect rain from your downspouts for reuse. Xeric gardens are gardens that are meant to be happy just with their natural climate and the amount of rain that typically falls in an area. Soil conditioning, think of it as making a sponge in the top 6 inches of your lawn, your landscape areas, so that your plants are happier and have a better chance of survival in an area. And that 6 inches of, we'll call it compost, and your native soils acts as a sponge that can soak up water that lands on it versus running off, which most new homes, especially, that happens, our front yards act more as parking lots because of all the compacted soil that's in there. Green roofs, permeable pavement, and trees. Trees do an excellent job of slowing water down as it falls through the canopy and down onto the ground, slowly letting it infiltrate. Gray infrastructures, concrete pipes, different other types of items that come together to manage to store or move water from one place to another. This is near 20th and Poppleton. It's an underground stormwater facility that it's a really big series of pipes that store a lot of water before it is slowly released back into our combined sewer system. And this was part of our CSO program. And we did some retrofits last year before, to put controls on it to actively manage it, to release water before a storm so you can hold more in there. And this system was the best choice for being able to handle all the runoff that was coming quickly and fast towards it, and giving us the best way to manage that water versus a big hole in the ground in this particular area. So gray infrastructure is just what it implies: pipes and structures that help move water from one place to the other. So in Omaha, there's two main types of sewer systems. You got the storm sewer system, or MS4, and it's the municipal separate storm sewer system, 1M, 4S's. And that is where your sanitary sewer and your storm sewer are in different pipes. The combined sewer system, oftentimes we refer to that system as the CSO program, in outreach and information and branding of sorts. And that's a case where your sanitary sewer flows in the same pipe as stormwater runoff from the streets and from your neighborhood. This map up in the top left corner shows generally where the CSO area is and where the storm sewer, the separate storm sewer system is. And this line right here is 72nd Street. So you can see that generally the whole CSO service area is east of 72nd Street. West of there is our storm sewer separated neighborhoods in parts of the city. The stormwater program, you can see the logo up here. That program is in charge of managing those separate storm sewers, not the sanitary sewer, just the storm sewer. And there is a permit that the city of Omaha holds with the state of Nebraska. It's called the MS4 permit. And that permit requires us to have 8 different program elements. And we have a plan, a stormwater management plan that says what we're going to do in each of those areas. And one of the reasons I get to talk with you today is for education outreach, encouraging public participation. Doing events like this to educate folks is definitely part of our plan. We love to do it. And it's important for everybody to know what's going on, how we're doing it, and working with our community to make sure we're doing it better. If you want to learn any more about any one of these particular areas, definitely go to omahastormwater.org to learn some more about it. The CSO program is a permit that we have with the state as well, and it allows us to, both of these permits allow us to discharge water from these sewer systems. And so our combined sewer system has different requirements as well to make sure that we're meeting the Clean Water Act requirements. We're one of over 800 communities with a combined sewer permit as well. For us here locally, before the CSO program began to manage our combined sewer overflows. So CSO stands for Combined Sewer Overflow, but it's also the acronym for the program that we have, Clean Solutions for Omaha, that is trying to meet the requirements of the Clean Water Act. Before we started implementing all the different projects to address the flow in that system, we modeled that about in an average year, there was 8 billion gallons of combined sewage and stormwater runoff that would go into the Missouri River or the Papillion Creek or Coal Creek systems, which is a significant amount of water and definitely something we want to be able to address, because we don't want to put all that pollution into our receiving waters or have the folks downstream of us have to interact with that. So the map on the right shows the blue area of the CSO service area. These red dots and triangles show where there's points where combined sewer overflows, or when there's too much rain, that's where water will discharge from the system into our waterways. There's 9 to the Papillion Creek, 7 to the Missouri River, and so far 4 have been deactivated. Over 2,000 miles of sewers and a 45-mile square mile service area. So it's a very large area to manage. So the combined system is, you have in a residential neighborhood, your sanitary line comes out and connects with the main line that comes through there. There might be an inlet in your neighborhood that is also connected to the same pipe. When it rains, runoff goes into those inlets, goes down into the storm sewers. Also, some parts of the neighborhood, and there's a lot of downspouts that were plumbed into this line as well. And so that is during dry weather, that's not a big deal. These combined sewers take all that wastewater, take it down to that plant that I had a picture of before at the Missouri River Water Resource Recovery Facility. But it's when it rains, there's too much water, there's too much flow to all go to the treatment plant. So it goes through these overflow points into a discharge place, because you can't have all this wastewater back up into our neighborhoods, so it overflows. When a neighborhood is separated, if you live in an area where a project has occurred or it will occur, we add an additional sewer to become a storm sewer, where the inlets in the street are connected to that. And then the only thing that goes into the former combined line is just sanitary waste, so it becomes a sanitary line. So there are definitely neighborhoods as part of the CSO program that are being separated as the means to address that pollution. The program as a whole is, has a permit. We have to meet this requirement. So we come up with a plan, a long-term control plan. And this In pulling that together, the city looked at making sure that we're meeting the intent of the permits, making sure that it was affordable for our ratepayers, and that the community accepted it. And so those drove the development of the program. And it resulted in a long-term control plan that was put together and originally approved in 2010. There was updates to it in 2015 and 21, and the plan itself is a compilation of almost 100 separate individual projects, which include green infrastructure projects, sewer separation projects. Just on the south side of Baxter Arena is a new facility. It's called the Saddle Creek RTB, Rapid Treatment Basin. And so that went in there because there's some parts of town where we can't separate. And so when it rains, we're trying to collect as much of that overflow as possible and quickly clean it up before it goes into in that case, the Little Papillion Creek. And then we also do underground storage areas. That example of the gray infrastructure, that site, it was an example of underground storage that we've done on a smaller scale in some of the neighborhoods. The program timeline, again, it was adopted in 2010. There was updates in 15 and 21. All these projects as a whole, the goal is to get it completed by 2037. So this project will continue on until that point. Fontenelle Park. Well, I guess this is a really good point. I'm going to transition into more pretty pictures versus words and a lot of technical stuff for giving you that background. So this is a good point for us to see if there's any questions at all. If there are, please definitely put it in the chat. I don't see there's any in the Q&A or the chat. But if there are,
I do have a question of my own. You shared a few bioretention projects. Could you share a bit about how you guys monitor these projects for effectiveness, or if they're monitored for effectiveness over time, and then if you make changes based on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of projects out there, that the city owns and that the public owns. Public installs green infrastructure, bioretention, rain gardens a lot because they develop a site. We don't actively monitor them. We definitely keep tabs on them to make sure that they're working the way they're supposed to. But we have a monitoring program. It's one of our 8 minimum controls to do just that, to make sure that these things are working well. So we have a number of sites across town that we take water grab samples of, observe it, and keep making sure that these strategies that we're using are in fact cleaning the water, slowing it down, working. And so we do an annual report, and we usually put in that information in that report that we send to the state to make sure that they know we're meeting our requirements for the permit itself. I love to present on it. Others in our program can present it as well. If you really want to get into the details of it, I'd be happy to share that. And so that's definitely a requirement of the permit, that we make sure what we're doing actually is having a benefit.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I want to speed it up a little bit here since I just realized we're 15 minutes to 7 o'clock and want to make sure there's time for some Q&A. Fontenelle Park is went under a transformation a number of years ago where the lagoon was expanded and the neighborhood surrounding it started to drain towards it. And in total, about, I forget the actual acres that drained to it, but it was expanded. Oh, there we go. This is the right picture. I'm sorry. I mixed up my slides there. We're looking west from the west parking lot at Fontenelle Park, and this is where water from the west part, the west neighborhood comes into the park. And as we turn around and look towards the east, you can see the lagoon in the background. And this is the area where water is rushing into during a storm event. Lots of cattails and grasses in there. And once you start to look, this little edge right here, this area is meant to capture a lot of the silt and sediment that comes from the neighborhood. So every once in a while, we're going to have to get in here and scoop all that stuff out because it's a lot easier to collect it here in this area than it is in the lagoon itself. There's a retaining wall that kind of delineates these two areas. Ducks love to hang out in that particular area. But you can see the vegetation is really started to come in very well, almost too well, because there's certain areas here on the east side where some Phragmites, which is an invasive grass, is coming. So we're trying to actively manage those areas as best as we can. In certain areas, sometimes our maintenance practices is to mow it down so nothing goes, the weed seeds don't go to seed. So not to say that area is going to always be mowed, but as these things mature, native vegetation takes a good solid 5-7 years to really kind of establish itself so that it can compete with all the other weeds that might blow in from around the neighborhood. So this picture here, you kind of, it's hard to tell, but over here where this gentleman is, there are some invasive grasses that we're actually trying to take care of and prevent from going to seed and spreading any further. All right, here's Adams Park wetlands. There's 276 acres that drain to this park. And when we did a sewer separation in the neighborhood, doing the wetland at Adams Park saved about $4.5 million from not having to make bigger pipes downstream. We're able to store 7.7 acre feet. So imagine 7.7 acres foot deep of water. That's how much water can get stored in there. If this wasn't there, then this water would have to rush through pipes. And in order to get it to move efficiently through that pipe, they would have to be bigger. So we were able to do something natural like this, create an amenity for the neighborhood, and save money all at the same time. The original Adams Park had ball fields on the north end and then a small kind of pond on the south side. The new layout has stormwater coming in at the southwest corner, and it goes through these little pools and riffles to kind of slow it down, get some of the sediment out of it, and then have it go into the wetland on the north end. Mute this here real quick. Don't need to have the sound on. This video shows a rain event at Adams Park in 17. It was a quick 0.07 inch rain, but it was the first one of the season. So as that flow starts coming, the flow is looking almost black in nature. And so you can just see how much pollution is washing off of our neighborhood and going into the park. So I fast forward a little bit. You can see it coming out into this large pool area. And the scale, you can see how the flow increased significantly in a very short amount of time with only a 0.07 inch rain event. So when you see these big projects, installations, you can appreciate how much water is coming to it just on this 0.07 inch rain. And this was just one storm of all the trash and debris that we were able to collect in the structure that helps kind of keep this trash in there. Some of the finer silts will get itself out, but all this pollution, all this waste right here was going out to the Missouri River because it was in the combined sewer system and would get flushed out during the rain event. So we had 273 acres of neighborhood drained to the park. In 18, there was a 2.5 inch rain. So that is over almost 18 million gallons of runoff, or if it just rains 1 inch, it's 7.2 million gallons of water. That's a significant amount of water. You can think of it as 625 gallons per 1,000 square feet. So when you look at your roof and measure it, even if you put a 55-gallon rain barrel on a downspout that handles 1,000 square feet, that 55 gallons will fill up in no time with a small rain event. Here's August of 2021. We've been maintaining Adams Park for a number of years now, I believe 7 years. I've been going on with the maintenance. This was June of this year. We've had the cattails really starting to fill in quite a bit to the point where we have to kind of pull them out each season to make sure that it doesn't clog up the waterways. The storms this year were tough. Mother Nature one ups us all the time. And so these two storms, May 21st and 26th, were really intense where there was so much stuff that kind of blinded the screen. Water backed up, came out of the top of that structure, and you can see how it pushed this grass down and caused some damage around the sides of the wall. And so we're in the process of trying to get this fixed currently. Over at Spring Lake Park, just south of the Henry Dory Zoo, saw some pictures of it earlier. Like South Omaha, or South High School, South Spring Lake Elementary School are nearby. So the park is used a lot by the schools. It was revitalized by putting the lake back in there during a sewer separation project, and the neighborhood and the city came together to make this a reality. This is a really good project to see what's possible when the community and the city come together and create something really good and functional. Looking from F Street, this road at the bottom of the picture is F Street. It's a high hazard dam to hold back the water from the lagoon. It was a high hazard dam even before this particular project. It's just now with the lake in there, it's officially a high hazard dam that we maintain. And coming up to the north is a series of other practices like wetlands and basins to help clean the water before it gets to the Spring Lake Lagoon itself. Some of the other elements that are in the park include a rain garden within the parking lot at Spring Lake Park. This is the North Valley above the lake that we just saw from the aerial. To the left, there's a meandering stream, and it goes up to a series of basins that kind of slow water from the neighborhood down. This is a picture from the parking lot back up to the North Valley. Parking lot's over here to the left, and this is a wetland. So there's 4 different little pockets of wetlands before it goes to the meandering stream a little bit further north. This is a picture looking to the north of the lake itself. You can see these little rock jetties where people can walk out on and fish. So the neighborhood is separated. All their runoff comes into the neighborhood, ultimately slowly makes its way down to the lake. And even then there's water is going to fill up this lake at some point. It eventually all will go into the storm sewer system and make its way slowly down towards the Missouri River. And so towards F Street, there's this big cone that I'm looking down in this main picture here where you see some storm sewer pipes coming in to that area. And then it goes into a singular storm sewer pipe that goes underneath F Street onto the other side. So there's a lot going on in any of these projects that we have. Hitchcock Park over by 42nd and Q Street, there's a series of 3 rain gardens or bioretention systems. This is the middle one, the biggest one, and there's a lot of native grasses, sedges, irises, some black-eyed Susans in that particular site. These systems, with the maintenance contract that we have a contractor that maintains it. Neighborhoods, when it rains, flushes all the weed seeds in. And so as long as we keep up with it, it's not too bad managed. But with any of these systems, they're not a build it and let it go. It's a build it and maintain it as we go so it never gets out of hand or looks unruly. Albright Park down in South Omaha, just underneath the Highway 75, in between the Q Street and Chandler Road exits. And so this is next to Albright Park. There's some soccer fields to the right, but we set this up as a large native grass planting area. water comes in at the south end, kind of meanders its way to the bioretention area on the left side of this picture, where it slowly holds it and then drains out over time. A little bit south of Albright Park, right at where Harrison Street is a T intersection, is the Sarpy Ave wetland detention basin area. And there's a stream that comes in from the south from Sarpy County. You got storm sewers that come in from Harrison Street and Sarpy Ave here in the foreground. And a little bit further over here to the left is another storm sewer where all this water is coming into the wetland area. And as we look from above, you can see the water coming in at these different points, and then it goes into this back and forth S curve as it makes its way to the north end, where eventually we'll be able to go back into the sewer system at the north end. There are four main pockets of wetlands in between the streams. So when the storm hits, water comes in fast, it will fill up this whole area, but it'll kind of stay in these pockets of wetlands, create habitat, store water, becomes a really pretty nice amenity for the neighborhood. Rock Brook Tributary is a stream restoration project over at Prairie Lane Park, which is just south of 114th and Center Street. And so this is looking at what used to be kind of a concrete lined channel that was put back into a vegetated channel with some boulders, granite boulders in there to slowly bring the water down through the creek. And as we pivot towards the other side, Frederick Street right there, we look to the north. This is the stream as it runs in between the residential properties there. Taking an aerial view, we're above Frederick Street, and then this is the stream as it makes its way through the neighborhood and ultimately goes back into the storm sewer behind these apartments at the north end of it. And this project has held up very well. There's some areas that are eroding where runoff comes in between the homes. So we kind of address those on a case-by-case basis. But it's looking nice. There's a lot of ducks at hand over here. I know a lot of the folks in the neighborhood appreciate that as well. Hell Creek, which is just on the other side of 120th, just south of Center Street, is another, was a concrete lined channel and was restored back to a more natural state. And this is a view from Selden Ave looking towards the south of the native grasses and flowers that are in that particular area. There's a lot of ducks in there. And when this first project happened, a lot of folks were skeptical. They were worried that water was going to get into their basements. And so a lot of education outreach happened. The build up to this project, it happened. And as we've maintained it over the years, a lot of the neighborhood have grown to appreciate it. There's times where the weeds can get going a little fast in between visits out there to maintain it. But we get out there and address them as they creep up. But a lot of the homeowners out there have taken ownership of it and give us a call and let us know when something doesn't look right and helps us maintain it. It's become quite a nice amenity. They like the environmental aspects of it, and they like the ducks that come along with it as well. Okay, enough of me talking. Go to omahaplants.org, omahastormwater.org, or the Omaha Stormwater Program, or City of Omaha Facebook pages to get more information. On omahastormwater.org, there's two digital books there. One, Sustainable Landscapes, that's more for homeowners. Bioretention Gardens is for the contractors. We do have hard copies of these if you're interested in those. I encourage you to go and check those out. And with that, that's it. There's a lot of information. We're right at 7 o'clock. Really appreciate everyone hanging out.
Thank you so much, Andy. It doesn't look like we have any questions in the Q&A or the chat right now. I do have a few questions myself, but we're gonna go ahead and launch our survey. If you guys would be able to take that, that would be amazing. It just helps us be able to keep putting on programming like this in the future. So Andy, you just mentioned a lot of homeowners appreciate the wildlife and the views that these projects bring, but also that a lot of them have some skepticism. So how do you balance functionality with public use and being able to have these things look pretty? And how do you gather feedback from the local communities about these projects?
Yeah, there's a lot of technical stuff that goes into this, right? Especially on the scale of a city trying to manage the runoff. Um, I didn't go into the water field. I went into horticulture, landscape design early on, and so I've learned, I would say, how to talk about this in a common language. I've become a lot more technical because you have to in the field. And so I enjoy talking with folks during events like this or during open houses to hear where people are coming from, because stormwater issues, good and bad, come in lots of different shapes and sizes. And so being able to share and talk in a way that helps us understand. My goal is always to get the light bulb to go off in folks' mind. My wife fondly told me she hated me one time because I taught her enough to where she drove by Funplex on her way be a teacher at Indian Hill Elementary School, and it was bothered by it. Like, she just felt angry about it. And when I gave some other lectures in college, some students said the same thing. They're like, I can't not see it anymore. And so for me, it's about getting people to, see it and be bothered by it, the bad stuff, but also appreciate the good stuff as well. How to do, taking that a step further when we do projects and working with the community, sometimes you have to engineer a solution that, I really don't want to have to do that, or the community doesn't want to do it a certain way. But you got to figure it out and figure out the cost benefits of any given approach to something, and then talk with folks and get them to understand, not get them to understand, but help them come to grips with why the solution that was chosen was right. It's I'm talking kind of generically in the sense, but it takes time to do that, to work through thoughts and concerns. But when I've done that, I know I've enjoyed my interactions with folks, even though it might have been contentious at first, trying to break through. But it works well. And in the case of those stream restoration projects, I say have a thick skin. And so I can weather the storm, so we can get to a point where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this worked out pretty well, and make them a advocate for the solution. Hopefully, it plays out that way. So,
Thank you. We have a question from Mary. Can you explain more about what the new Saddle Creek facility does? Specifically, what does it capture? Mary's wondering if it captures gases like methane or anything else like that.
gotcha. Hi, Mary. The new Saddle Creek RTB is, for lack of a better description, a facility that can handle a whole bunch of runoff that's coming from the Saddle Creek area watershed, and trying to clean it as fast as possible and then letting it back into the Little Peeling Creek. So it's not a treatment facility like the Missouri River Water Resource Recovery Facility that actively is digesting and cleaning up sanitary waste. What the Saddle Creek facility is doing is trying to clean stormwater runoff that has sanitary waste in it because it's coming from a combined sewer area. So it's a little bit different. And so there's no methane that's there. That's part of anaerobic or digestive processes that are part of a more true water resource recovery facility. And so that's the really simplistic description of that of that facility, and it's set up in a way that water will go in there and go through a labyrinth, get stored, get filtered out, get cleaned so it meets water quality requirements before it gets let back into the Little Bepillion Creek. Great. Any more questions?
Thank you. I just looks like there's none in the Q&A. I just have one more myself. With these really large projects, Adams Park, Spring Lake, Hitchcock Park, the Saddle Creek Detention Basin, obviously we're having huge benefits for the city. Do we have any more projects like this potentially coming in the future? Anything coming down the pipeline that you might be able to share with us?
Oh, new projects. There was a time where we were doing all sorts of green infrastructure because the areas where we were working kind of lent themselves to that. So it's Spring Lake Park, Adams Park. Some of the projects now don't lend themselves to that quite as well. Our park system on the east side of town is a historic place, right? It was HWS Cleveland helped design it, and it's areas that actually they're set up in places where water is going to, right? And so working with our parks department has been great. It presents lots of opportunities to do things like this. But in some other areas that are just so tight or so urban, it's hard to do some of these other types of solutions. And so trying to think off the cuff, there's no big green infrastructure projects on the horizon, but each of our projects within the long-term control plan for the CSO program does evaluate any given site for how green infrastructure could be used to make that project better. There's a lot of stuff going on with our planning department as well, with helping in the South Canopy neighborhood on trying to mitigate urban heat island effects. And so we've been talking with them about using green infrastructure to do that. So we'll see where that goes. Hopefully that's a good success story we can talk about another time.
Okay, amazing. It looks like that's all we have for questions right now. Thank you so much for presenting for us, Andy. It's always amazing when we have you here. I feel like I learn something new every single time. So thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Kat.
Thank you.